When you get a new thing, right, and I'm not talking about disorders, I'm talking about anything, new car, new computer, new whatever, right? Sometimes you discover that there are aspects about that thing that you didn't realise were things in the first place. ADHD is no different to that. So I'm going to go through 7 things about ADHD that nobody tells you and nobody really talks about. Number 1, ADHD is a big deal. No one really talks about how big a deal it is, probably because a lot of ADHDers are funny and they end up making jokes about their own challenges. But challenges, my friends, they are nonetheless. Relationships can get ruined and working practices to ADHDers can feel bizarre. Like, what is the appeal of sitting in a box between 8 o'clock and 6 o'clock every day of the week for every week of the rest of your life? That sounds fucking horrible. For me, that has held me back getting corporate jobs, getting experience of big organizations and things like that. And it has held me back in my life. So it's a big deal. Like, don't let anybody tell you it's not a big deal. We don't talk about how big a deal it is. And if you've got a kid with ADHD, bloody get on it, mate, because you could help them from suffering unnecessarily and you could help them propel themselves forward in a way that I couldn't do. Now, don't get me wrong, my parents are great. I love them to pieces, but they didn't know about ADHD when I was a kid, and it really wasn't any sort of thing that you would want to get yourself involved with, which is ludicrous now we think about it, but maybe it was such a big deal back then that people just couldn't handle it. At least we've got the space, knowledge, and education for us to understand what it is and how big a deal it is. Number 1, it's a big deal. Number 2, there's nothing wrong with you if you have ADHD, and there's nothing wrong with your kids if they have ADHD. You are a miracle of life. They're a miracle of life. The chances of you or them existing in the shape and flavour that they do are so infinitesimally small that we cannot even begin to process what sort of a miracle occurred for that to happen. Whether you've got ADHD, another neurodiversity, or you're neurotypical, you've still got your own unique, special thing to bring to the world. You're a part of our society and we should be proud to have you regardless of how you are. You might not be like other people, and that's okay too, because can other people master 5 careers over their lifetime? Can other people pick up and become an instant expert in a topic that they just enjoy? Can other people make connections between random things and make that make sense and funny to other people? No, they can't. Not anybody can do that. But ADHDers can, and that is your value. It is in your uniqueness. Don't let anybody tell you there's something wrong with you. And parents, don't let anybody tell you there's something wrong with your children. Incidentally, if you're struggling with parenting, I have a video playlist that might just provide some different perspectives and helpful hints and tips. I'm no expert, I'm no clinician, but I am a parent myself. I hope it helps. Number 3, adults can have ADHD. I mean, okay, like, more people are talking about this and it's great. There has been a surge of diagnoses amongst my peers. I can definitely sense an explosion of adult ADHD diagnoses coming upon us in the next 5 years. But still, not enough people talk about how adults can have ADHD. If you think about it, yeah, if you're a kid with ADHD, you're gonna grow up to be an adult with ADHD. If you're a kid with blonde hair, you're probably going to grow up to be an adult with blonde hair. It's the same sort of thing. You don't grow out of it, you just learn to cope with it. That's ADHD, not blonde hair. The problem is, though, that coping with it without the knowledge, empathy, and language that we can develop throughout our struggles might not be the best way of coping with ADHD as an adult. I know it wasn't my best way of coping with it. My coping strategies were terrible because I didn't know what I was having to cope with. I just thought everybody felt the same and they were just better at life than I was. So it can have major effects on your self-esteem, your place in society, and how you end up doing things. Just remember, adults can have ADHD too, and if you think you might be one of those adults, go and talk to your doctor and get yourself sorted out. It's never too late to feel good about your life and the life that you want to provide for those that you love. Number 3, adults can have it. Number 4, women find it harder to get a diagnosis than men do. Now, because this is a spectrum disorder, and no two ADHDs are exactly the same, it can be difficult by default to diagnose, like full stop. But if you're a woman, it can be extremely frustrating to not get anywhere with your clinicians and diagnosticians. I have a female friend who is absolutely convinced that she's got ADHD. She went to her GP and they just kind of sent her off with some sertraline for anxiety. That's that. Now, I'm not a clinician. I'm not a diagnostician. But knowing what I know and knowing her, she got ADHD. It's totally clear to me that that's what's going on for her, bless her. Now, of course, the establishment likes to levy the burden on women. No change there then. And I'm going to read you a quote now, which is kind of annoying. They, quote, they, women, more often have internalized and less noticeable symptoms. They are more likely to use coping strategies that help hide their symptoms, and sometimes their difficulties can be mistaken for being hormonal or anxious. That sounds like bullshit to me. Why then believe that the burden's on them to not have symptoms that are less internalized? Like, it's just crazy. For me, the real reason for this imbalance seems to be something around the stigmas of ADHD being focused on boys, naughty boys, and potentially the stigmas on women being hormonal, which is utter nonsense. We're all hormonal at the end of the day. Hopefully it'll bring some comfort to some people that big publishers like Psychiatry UK and Attitude magazine are also highlighting this imbalance, and the establishment is starting to take note. There's hope yet, but number 4, women find it more difficult than men to get a diagnosis. It's crazy town. Number 5, hyperfocus is exhausting. Nobody tells you about this, but it is absolutely mind-blowingly exhausting. Because for me anyway, and I'd like to hear if anybody else experiences this, I don't often have a lot of choice on what I hyperfocus on. I'm much better since I started meds, have to admit. But back in the day, like, I could look into scones for like 3 days straight and learn everything about the structural integrity and how to make them and what goes into the perfect kind of topping and whether you should do this or do that or cut them in half. It's exhausting. And in the moment, it can feel really good. But once you kind of burn out, you need recovery time. And the problem then with recovery time and burnout is that you spent so long hyper-focusing on a thing that doesn't really help your life sometimes. You need to try and get back into the stuff that does help your life, and that can be exhausting too. And even when you do that, there's just no guarantee that you're not going to get distracted by something along the road and go into 3 days of hyperfocus about Norway or something. It's exhausting. Number 5, hyperfocus is exhausting. Don't let anybody tell you it's a superpower. Kind of is, but only when we've got control over it. Because otherwise, I don't know if I mentioned it yet, it's exhausting. Number 6, migraine disorder might actually be a part of your ADHD. A study done in 2018 showed that men with ADHD are twice as likely to suffer migraine attacks. That's a fascinating correlation, not necessarily a causation. We all understand that, right? But it is interesting that those two are linked. In another study done of around 6,000 children, there was a link found between the severity of their ADHD symptoms and the severity and frequency of their migraine attacks. Interestingly, there's not that much data on women. Establishment! Because hyperfocus is exhausting, part of that recovery period can exacerbate some of your migraine disorder symptoms. They can bring on migraine attacks. I remember it used to be really frustrating that my migraines wouldn't happen on the lead up to something stressful or in the moment of something stressful. My migraines just hung around and waited for the stress thing to be over, and then bang, like as soon as it's gone, maybe even a day later, have a migraine, mate. Good for you. We've done the thing. It's over. Now you can't enjoy it because you're having a migraine. So frustrating. But what I've come to learn is that perhaps my ADHD was regulating my neurotransmitters in a bizarre way. Well, of course it was. We all know that it regulates them in a bizarre way. It dysregulates them. Once they'd been depleted because of the overuse of them during stress times, my migraines just kicked the door down and came straight back in again, man. But now I'm medicated. Now I'm more balanced. I'm less stressed. Now I'm less stressed. My migraines don't happen as often or as hard. So number 6, yeah, your migraines may be caused by your ADHD. And if you suffer migraines, maybe you've got ADHD as well. Like, get yourself checked. Really fascinating. Number 7, ADHDers are usually funny, creative, and kind. Now, you've all seen my videos, you know I'm hilarious, but I've also been working in the creative industries for my entire working career. I also do my best to be as kind to people as I can be, and you know, I kind of go about this live and let live, or do as thy neighbor, do unto thy neighbor. I try and display the kindness that I would like reflected back to me. Now, there are some people who could put up a pretty convincing argument that I'm a dick. And to those people, well, I say, you're a dick. Because ADHDers have a different brain, because of the differences in the way that those brains work, we can often make connections where neurotypical people just wouldn't think to. And those connections gives us this kind of badge of being creative, being free thinkers. And a lot of the time we can see the absurdity and the comedy in the links that we make. Most ADHDers love to laugh because, well, first of all, who doesn't like a laugh? And second of all, laughing has been shown to release feel-good endorphins, serotonin, dopamine. That's what we miss. So laughing, being around other people laughing, making people laugh, being in a situation where there's a collective group of people laughing, it's great for ADHDers. And so we absorb a lot of the things that make other people laugh and then we display them back out again. At the end of the day, comedy is a massive part of all of our lives, and especially an ADHDer's life. And laughing is just good for the soul, man. But ultimately, we're blessed with that ability to interpret and learn what kind of makes a lot of people laugh, and we try to do that in some way or another. On that, we generally have higher levels of empathy because we learn that this alone, this being empathic, helps us release good neurotransmitters that help us feel better about everyday life and help us get on with stuff. This general high level of empathy and generosity can be exploited, and we can find ourselves as ADHDers in, you know, bad places. I've found myself kind of in financial hardship and in bad places with jobs and letting somebody else go before me, all this kind of stuff. It's easily exploitable to be empathic and to be generous as an ADHDer. So if you are an ADHDer, be mindful of your generosity. Be mindful of how it can be exploited. And if you're a friend of an ADHDer, don't exploit them. That's a dick move. But if you see anybody else exploiting them, call them out, man. Like, let's just get it done. So number 7, ADHDers, number 7 even, ADHDers are often funny, creative, and kind. So there you go, there's 7 things about ADHD that no one really talks about. If you've got your own thing about ADHD that no one really talks about, leave it in the comments, boy. I want to hear from you. I want to grow this community. I want to converse in meaningful, cool, interesting, helpful ways. Yes, I do. If you're not subscribed already, please consider doing so. I would be massively appreciative, and you get to consume fun content like this. So for now, I do hope you've had fun, but always remember to talk to your doctor, take your meds, and have a great day. It's bloody simple, isn't it?